Good morning, everybody. Hi. So sorry I'm a few minutes late. I had a I had one of my creative ideas that happened when I'm in the shower. There's something about like relaxation, right? That makes everything flow better. And there's probably something important about that for all of us, like to actually take the time to just actually let go, right? My favorite place is the shower, right? And it actually had to do with, and it wasn't just random creativity. I was thinking about you, all of you. And um, we have a meeting today, a staff meeting about how we're going to teach ACI 16, 17, and 18, the review courses. How are we going to review all of everything? Um, and what's the best way to review? What's the best way to get all that done, to do the homeworks, to do the quizzes, right? To do all the things, right? All the things that are, you know, that prove that you know the material, right? Which is not true. Yeah. Just because you can copy a homework master doesn't mean you understand it. But just because you can copy it doesn't mean you don't understand it. Um, but I was thinking about it, and next week we're going to talk a little bit more what that's going to look like. But then I had an idea on how to combine it with how to prepare all of you to be teachers yourself. So Anastasia, I've just redone all of our teacher trainings as well. So so I apologize for being a few minutes late. And because I was thinking, really what I was thinking about is, these classes are deep. Like, we're gonna have to, we're reviewing last class today for about probably a half an hour before we move on to anything else. Um, but this is like all 15 of these courses is basically everything you need to know from the open teachings, start to finish, the whole path, all the detail is there. And if you were listening, I had the karma for it. You also probably heard some of the some of the advanced teachings within the open teachings, right? Because it's not like they're separate. They're just, it's a perspective. One of my really good friends who studied for many, many years, he was always frustrated. Like, there was some kind of seed that he had, but he was always frustrated. He was like, something's not right. Like, was always fighting me and battling. And, I couldn't find an angle for him to like just kind of relax and be like, no, don't, just relax. It's okay. It gets clearer as you go along. Um, but he always battled, and fought. And then once he entered Diamond Way teachings, and I was there for it and got the first class on it. All of a sudden, it was like he arrived home because, and I knew it, but it was like he already had the seeds. He already was there. It was just the foundation that was being built, right? And so it's interesting, like, different people have different paths. And you've heard people like the first Panchen Lama. Like, if you've read his book, which is available on the Diamond Cutter Press website, his beautiful Diamond Way poetry. He received empowerment early in his life. Like, his teacher recognized it would do him a service it would be a disservice to not empower him, even though he didn't have the 18 courses, right? Which is, they didn't have 18 courses then, but it's, the the curriculum, right? He didn't have it, right? But as you read his poetry and as he gets older, he studies more and more the foundations. He studies the Vinaya, he studies the open teachings, because they're the engine. They're the engine that makes it all go. Right. And so when, you know, it's not like you lose that when you're like, oh, I'm finally a tantrika. Yeah, shut up. Yeah, the moment you say that, you're not, you know. Um, but we all do, because we like to feel special, right? Right. But the foundation, you always go back to those foundations. You always go back to the six perfections. You always go back to renunciation, bodhicitta, and wisdom. Like you go back to your, the foundational 10 virtues, right? You go back to the various levels of understanding of emptiness. Um, you go back to just plain old compassion. That's why we taught the medicine Buddha, which is a lower, which is a lower class of Diamond Way. There's 4 classes, right? Because sometimes you just need to love people and care about them, right? Sometimes we can't think about emptiness. you know it's hard, it's difficult, especially when things are tough for us or tough for other people, right? you know we have all these methods that based on what's arising in the moment, right? And that's where your practice becomes subtle. And that's when your practice becomes um, personal, I would say. you know Many people ask me, Tim, I get new meditations every week, I get these new things, there's all these ideas, there's all these things to do. Well, I can't possibly do all of them. You're like, no, of course you can't. If you tried to do them all in a single day, you would not eat. Like it'd be impossible. You wouldn't see anybody. You wouldn't talk to anybody. Hold on a second here. So, but the idea is that you become a well-rounded practitioner in all the different facets. And then at some point you just kind of drop in, and then it becomes highly personal. Yes, you still have a teacher. Yes, you still, ask them for guidance. That's not what's not going on there. But then you're able to say, okay, well, today, this is what's happening. This is where my emptiness understanding is. This is where my compassion is. Like, oh, stuff's not working. Why stuff? Well, I haven't been really focusing on, the basic virtues. I haven't been thinking about renunciation. I haven't been thinking about death meditation. Well, shit, I haven't been thinking about really about how karma and its consequences work, right? And what makes a good practitioner is that you recognize what's going on in you. What's going on? Like, what's today's weather? Right? You open up your like self app and you're like, what's today's weather like? And the weather changes throughout the day, of course. You know, like, how, like, if you're having a good day, do you have pockets of not good? Or if you're having a bad day, do you have pockets of happiness? Of course, right? Those things kind of ebb and flow, wax and wane, right? And your understandings of emptiness, your understandings of planting seeds come and go, so having awareness of what's just arising, like, when, you know, some people say, just let your thoughts go by like clouds. Like, yeah, but it's not just let them go by, it's also notice, right? Because that informs you of what is next. Like, what do you do next? Like, how do I sit in meditation today? You know, and if you're not there yet, that's why you have instruction. Like, well, what should I do? And you're like, well, each of the ACI homeworks has a meditation. Right? You know, oh, I got that cool meditation in class last week. Maybe I should try that. Maybe there's a special message moving to a diamond way point of view in the meditation that was taught in the class last week. Or maybe there was something cool that was said that, is going to open up your heart or open up your mind or shift the karmas that are arising. Those unchangeable, changeless sufferings that we have, those feelings of being stuck, those feelings of not being able to get better. You know, I don't have time. I don't have energy. I don't have passion. I'm sick. I'm going to die. Whatever the thought is of the day, right? Or if it's the same thought, obsessive thought that you've had for weeks or months, or maybe your life, right? Maybe you have certain kinds of thoughts that have been living rent free in your head. You know, maybe you decided the world was a certain way when you were 4 years old because someone said something to you or something happened, right? And then you decided that's how the world was. You believed it. You understood it that way. You know, your 4-year-old brain was doing the best it could, right? And then it's been living rent free, right? Then you get to look at those things, and then those are the kinds of things that block you from dissolving them. So that's why we do all of this, right? You've built your foundation, you build your house, and then you keep building it, right? I met someone last night who wants to go through I told them about my idea, which I'm going to tell you about next week for the 16, 17, and 18. And they were like, I want to do that. And I was like, did you do the courses yet? Oh, yeah, I did. But I want to review. Like, I feel like I need a full review. I'm like, good. So think of what we're doing right now is it's all foundations. And each time you come back to it, each time you look at it, you see it from a different angle, from a different vantage point. Right. And especially when you review, you know, your weather from 6 months ago, you know, you know, you looked at like what was happening, like you can start seeing trends and patterns, and start seeing trends and patterns, that have maybe been around for your entire life. I have a particular pattern of I have a deep, deep fear of my body, of getting sick or staying sick, and then not letting me do the things that I want to do. Right. And I can, and I can see that pattern. It started when I was young. I had some major health issues when I was younger, even as a child. Right. And so I have, you know, and then what happens is when it happens, then I feel like I'm a shitty practitioner. Like, oh my God, you've taught all these ACI courses. People come to your classes. You're the director of ACI. You're not allowed to, you're not allowed to do this. You're not allowed to go into that. Like, that's not, like, there's something wrong with you. You're a fake. You're a phony. Like, but that's what the thoughts do. That's what the thoughts do. That's what, the weather, it's like we can't control the weather. I mean, karmically fine. But like generally, you know, I'm not sitting here being like, I hope the sun comes up this morning. I hope the sun comes up this morning. Right. Like, yes, my karma, I have the karma for a sun to come up, which will come up shortly. I hope I can see it's on the mountains right now. But, you know, just like the obsessive thoughts, the worries, the concerns, the feelings of being phony, or the feelings of not being good enough, or, you know, oh, if I told people about this, then they won't want to come to my class. And then I feel that the whole thing cycles, right? But if you look at it like, weather trends, like geological trends, right? It's just thoughts, right? Thoughts that are living in my mind that are just habitual karmas, right? They come and go, right? And then you start understanding their nature, and you understand what they do, and what the power they have, or what power they don't have, right? And then you go to the foundations, like, okay, well, it is true that this body is going to get old and die. Sorry, Tim, right? That's the nature of samsara, right? It will give up on you, whether it gives up on you today or next week. Hopefully, 30, 40 years, we got some good years left, right? you know but what's living, I like, that's a good question to ask. What's living rent free in your head? That's just a truth that you have decided is true about who you are. What's living rent free in your head? And maybe you should start charging it rent. Right? And then be like, look, dude, you know, maybe you need to go find somewhere else to live. Right. But it's actually more powerful to understand what is the message? What is it telling you? What is it telling you about who you were? Right. And oftentimes these thoughts that are running around inside of us that we believe, that then have emotional components to them. They, most of the time, they were developed or started. Yes, they're a karma. Like, don't forget, I'm always talking about karma. Why you had it in the first place. But the idea is that these ideas came up usually in reaction to something you didn't understand. Right. And it's usually something that's, you decided you had to behave in a certain way to protect yourself. Your 4-year-old self, your 10-year-old self, your 15-year-old self, even older selves still do this, decided that this was the way to protect yourself. And so oftentimes it's unresolved emotion, things that you didn't understand. And to go through that process can sometimes be painful, but it can be completely liberating. And when you allow yourself to just feel, like a feeling, if you feel unadulterated, naked feeling without putting a story to it or attaching a story, because sometimes we attach stories to things. This is all related to the mind only school, by the way. I'm not just talking, not riffing, just in case everyone's wondering. Unresolved, unadulterated, naked feeling will last maybe about 2 minutes. If you can allow the layers of feeling to just come through and not judge them or put a story to them. And the reason I'm talking about this is I had a beautiful traditional Chinese medicine session the other day, body work, because I was tired of thinking about my problems. I was like, maybe I just need to relax, just stop thinking, right? And we found something in my body that was it was tense, and as we moved through it, just brought up emotion. It was just like, whoa, a wave of emotion. And the practitioner leaned in so gently and said, "Don't tell a story now, just feel it." I wanted to be like, this is my pre-verbal womb experience of a that I didn't understand, and it was like it actually kind of felt that way, right? But it was like, don't think about it, like don't tell a story, just move it, right? It doesn't matter. It actually doesn't matter. It's nice to know, it's nice to like investigate, well, what was that thing that my dad said to me when I was 12 years old that hurt me so much, which he did, right? And if I keep circling in it, like it was probably one sentence my dad didn't even think about. I bet you if I said something to him, he'd be like, "What are you talking about?" Right? But it doesn't matter. Like, and then when you think about karma, there's so many billions of lifetimes and billions of seeds that you have right now. Was it your 4-year-old trauma? Was it the womb trauma? Was it the thing your dad said when you were 12? Or was it, I don't know, when you were, you know, when you were a ninja in Japan, right? And someone and the warring ninja clan jumped out of the trees and kicked your ass and knocked you over and like cut off your arm, right? you know or maybe you did that to somebody else, right? You, not you, your seed stream did it, right? But who knows? I went into a ninja shop once, and I was transported to a parallel universe, it felt like. And all of a sudden I started picking up all the weapons. They had these authentic weapons. And I just started picking them up. And all of a sudden I had like the pose, like the postures, and I was moving in a way like the weapons should fit in my hands. It was kind of cool. It was weird, right? Then I left the ninja dojo, and then I promptly threw up. I had a karmic purification. Like, because I also in this way kind of experienced what those weapons did to others, right? I mean, I don't know for sure. That's just what it felt like. But that was weird, throwing up on the Japan the side of the street in Japan. They have no trash cans in Japan to throw up in, by the way. Anyway, but you don't need to worry so much about the why. It just is. It's just the seeds that are ripening right now. And the mind only school can help us understand that, right? They can help us understand what's happening in that particular moment, and then how to move through it with grace and dignity, which also can mean turning into a puddle on the floor for 2 minutes. Just feel like you will never see that. Although that's not true. But anyhow, so really what we're learning here is how to navigate our karmic landscape. Each of us has a unique karmic landscape. And so we're building those foundations. And why are we studying the mind only school? Like, why are we going back to a lower school when we're supposed to be going higher? We're supposed to go up, not down. A graceful puddle. Yes, that's a good t-shirt too. You know, a good cry can make the day much better. I promise. And especially those of you who are embarrassed to cry or think crying is, I don't know. Some people think that crying is, you know, not appropriate, or, men aren't allowed to cry. Women, you're allowed to cry. You're expected to cry. It's all bullshit. Stop it. Like, if you want to cry, just go take yourself to your cry box and just like let it out. Go find a friend, go get a hug. The best thing to do is right before you cry is to get a friend and then just turn into a 2-year-old. Right? and then get snot and tears all over their shirt, right? Let it out and then clean up their shirt, right? And then everyone laughs, right? But why? Like, why are we going to the lower? Why do we go to a lower school? Like, what does crying on someone's shoulder have to do with emptiness? You can meditate on that. And I'm an advocate. Yeah, I would say they are deeply related. And then the idea really is that the Madhyamika upper middle way presentation is extremely difficult to hold on to as a and it's not just an intellectual understanding, it's an orientation of being. Like when you open your eyes and you're like, don't like like I'm a upper middle way Madhyamika Prasangika thinker. I know, probably not. Like, it's a way of being, right? That integrates and takes time and integrates through meditation and realizations and hard work. But what are the pieces of that? Like a chess piece. Like what are some of the elements of it that we can focus on, which are not it, but are approximations? What are the things that are not emptiness, but are approximations of emptiness that can help us get to a deeper understanding? To get to that deeper understanding, where is it coming from? Where is it coming from? Right? And so the mind only presentation, honestly, is so helpful. It is incredibly powerful. It's not it, but it's pretty damn close. And it helps. And it's so helpful. Right. And so when the Buddha was asked by the Bodhisattva, Paramgata Samug, I always forget his name. Let's just call him the Bodhisattva. Okay. I don't know why. It's funny because even in Geshe-la's original classes, he he struggles to remember this guy's name. Um, the Bodhisattva who goes up to the Buddha says, "Look, when you first came out of you reached enlightenment and you taught your first students. By the way, the three turnings of the wheel are not necessarily historical in order. Okay, that we don't necessarily need to think of it that way. Like, oh, in the first 20 years of his life, he taught the first turning, or first 20 years of teaching, and then the second 20 years of teaching, he taught the second, and the third, it's not right. It's mainly it's based on the level of the student, right? It's who was in the room when he was talking, who was there, right? Who was listening. And as all of you start getting, you get your foundations and then you become teachers. One of the skills is one of the things we taught in teacher training 6 as an introduction around the Diamond Cutter Sutra is how to teach emptiness on various levels at the same time. So when you're teaching, how do you like ramp it up from like first turning stuff up to the second turning stuff, right? Maybe you come down to the third turning, maybe you return back to the first. Like, how do you arc a class so that they can hold on to something depending on where the mind is? And then the more people there are, the more difficult it becomes, of course. But how do you move through all of those? Like, how do you talk about the 4 Arya truths cause and effect, karma, right? All of these things, and then be like, yeah, well, guess what? Then nothing exists from its own side, including the four Arya truths, including karma, including emptiness itself, right? How do you then what do you do to people? And then by the end, you're like, oh yeah, by the way, don't forget to do your 4 steps, right? And everyone goes, oh, okay, cool, Tim, I'm gonna go plant some seeds. And you go, yes, right? Now, listen, I didn't say you don't plant seeds. I didn't say you don't do the 4 steps. None of those things indicate that it's not nihilism, right? None of those things are indicated in that. Like the doctor said, take the pill, do the 4 steps, right? The 4 steps will plant seeds for wisdom, right? But the 4 steps have emptiness. Duh. They have to. Okay. But what does it mean when the 4 steps have emptiness? What does it mean when you say that even your karmic stream is empty? The seeds that were planted before have emptiness. Are they self-existently a cause that's going to create a self-existent result? And then you have to think about it, because then you're like, well, can you change the cause to create a different result? Could you change a cause that when you were a ninja and you jumped out of a tree and you sliced off someone's head in a previous life? None of us are going to jail right now. Okay. By the way, I'm going to be a ninja for Halloween. Me and my godson, we're going to be ninjas. I'll send you guys a picture. I was feeling sad last week and I'm like, what can I do to feel better? I'm going to plan for Halloween. So I wrote my godson's mom and I'm like, do you think he'll want to be a ninja? She's like, let me ask. And he was like, yes. And so I bought ninja outfits. Right. So, but could that action, that seed has emptiness, right? Just imagine in some past life, because past lives were infinite. Okay, past lives were infinite. So therefore, probably we all have ninja seeds. Seeds that, we jumped out of trees and we cut off someone's head, right? Or threw a star at them, right? One of the ninja stars, right? That must have hurt, especially in the back, does it have to create a result, a self-existent result? Right? And you have to think about it, because there's a way to think about it where it doesn't violate the laws of karma, which, by the way, are also not self-existent. But the laws of karma are helpful, right? I mean, not only are they helpful, but everything that happens has a result. It creates a similar result. Nothing is lost, right? So then you have to think about, well, if karma has emptiness and nothing is lost, do I have to experience all of those things that happen? And if there's infinite number of things that happened, how do I get out of this? Has anyone had those thoughts in meditation? Like, am I the only weirdo who sits in meditation being like, oh my God, how do I do this? This is impossible. Just think of your own life. Just think of one life. Don't put infinite behind it. Infinite makes it worse, right? But there is a way through it. And then part of the way through it is the mind only school. So that bodhisattva was like, yo, Buddha, you said at one point, that things exist by definition. And then you got up on Peacock's Peak, which, by the way, I'm going to make a sign. So when I bought this house out front, there's a sign. They named the house the Healing Grounds. That's why I bought it, honestly. The name of the house was the Healing Grounds. Okay. Now the sign's kind of starting to fall down. It's old. And then the other day you all named it Peacock's Peak, right? So the Buddha gets up on Peacock's Peak here in Rimrock and is like announcing to everybody here, like nothing exists by definition, right? In fact, he actually said 5 radical things. Okay. Nothing exists by definition. Nothing starts. Nothing grows. Let me make sure I have the other 2 correct so I don't say something stupid. All things are peace, and all things are completely beyond the state of grief. Okay. He said 5 radical things. And then you know, and then the Buddha and the Bodhisattva is like, dude, what did you mean by those 5 things? And we dealt with the first one in the last class, right? We talked about the first one, which was nothing has any existence of its own, right? Nothing exists, right? And then he's like, Buddha, what did you mean? What did you mean by this? What did you mean by this crazy statement? Okay. And so the Buddha was like, oh, we have to make fine distinctions. That's not really what I meant. Okay. And this is where we have to from the mind only school point of view, when they hear the third turning the wheel and the Buddha said, this is what I really meant, they believe this is what he really meant. And then believe the other schools were figurative. Other turnings were figurative. And then this practitioners of the second turning say, well, actually, when the Buddha said what he really meant, he was actually being figurative. And he didn't mean what he said when he said, was what I really mean. So you can't even trust the Buddha when the Buddha says, this is what I really mean. Oh, right. So the Buddha was like, look, on Peacock's Peak, right? I love this. I'm gonna make a sign, as I said. What I really meant when I said that nothing exists is that I actually meant 3 different things. I'm making 3 distinctions, right? First distinction, right? There's 3 things that I meant here. Okay. Is that some things lack a definitive nature. That's true. Some things lack a nature of growing, and some things lack a nature of being emptiness or lack of being ultimate. Okay. 3 things. What I meant by that, when I said, look, I didn't mean that nothing exists. Nothing has any nature of its own. That's not what I meant. I was just trying to get you to think a little bit more deeply about things. I had to move you away from the first idea, which got you into doing some cool things, right? Like renunciation, like death meditation, like, I don't know, planting seeds, like taking care of others, right? I taught you how to do that. I didn't teach you, Emily Chen, but the 4 steps taught you, Emily Chen. Someone taught you, right? That you have to go out and, you want something, you got to give it to someone else first, right? Like, that's really freaking helpful, right? There's nothing wrong with that. That's where we all have to start. Like, we have to stop being so dang selfish. Like, what's the thing that happens when you're having a bad day, when you're having a shitty time? when you're bad mood, when the weather sucks, you stop thinking about other people and you start thinking about you and your pain. That's what happens, right? And then you go, well, I remember this teaching once. If I want to not be sick you know, or not have these obsessive thoughts, maybe I should help other people with these things. Like I mean, if you think about it, the emptiness is totally tied to all of that. But frankly, when the weather sucks, it's really hard to think that way. Just to get out of the house, to get the energy to do things. So and that's why when things are good, please, 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 that's when you need to run around planting good seeds. Right? Like calmly, gently, don't wear yourself out, of course. But that's when you need to do all the good things, because when you're not feeling well, you don't have the energy. You know, one of my friends told me is like, Tim, your house is lovely, but when you're having a bad day, it doesn't help you because you got to drive 20 minutes to see a human being. Right? Your seed planting is dependent upon you driving 20 minutes to interact with a human being. Like maybe it's a little bit too lonely for you. And I was like, thanks for making me feel better. Right? But there's nothing wrong with that. Like there's nothing wrong with those teachings. But then the Buddha said, look, well, what I really meant was three things, right? Things that don't have any definitive nature, constructs, kuntaks, right? Things that we make up, both non-existing and existing, right? Like anything you can imagine. And it's interesting, back in 1999, Geshe, the example Geshe used was, he said something that's a kuntak that doesn't exist is like a large pumpkin sitting on top of the Twin Towers in New York, crushing the Twin Towers. It's like you look out your window at the World Trade Center, and there's a gigantic pumpkin sitting on top of the Twin Towers, crushing it. Right. He actually went into the Twin Towers, before he went into a 3-year retreat, and was like, and then gave a teaching to that night and said, what holds these up is kindness. you know so you got to think about that, which is also a kuntak, by the way. Your kindness is a kuntak, right? But the thing that you put the name and terms onto, like, okay, someone has a baby. Emily Chen has a baby. All right. I know she doesn't want babies right now, but she has a baby, right? The baby pops out, and everyone looks at the baby. Everyone in the delivery room, Gibson, everyone's like, they look at the baby and they say, oh, Tashi. That's the Tibetan name. Okay. The baby pops out and everyone goes, oh my God, it's Tashi. Okay. What is it about the blob, the cuteness, or whatever you want to, like, whatever you think babies are, right? That indicates that the baby is called Tashi. And if you listen to the original classes that Geshe Tupten Rinchen gave on this, it's hysterical. Like he hammers this point for hours. All right. Is there anything about that 2-arm, 2-leg ball of life? Okay, I'm trying to be nice, right? That just comes out, right? That you love dearly, right? But is there anything about that screams Tashi from its own side, right? Or like when you came out, did someone say, oh, that's Sarah? Oh, that's Svetlana. Oh, that's Constanza, right? No. Like if that were the case, if the baby popped out and you know, you wouldn't do this, okay, in real life, but just go with the example. You put the baby in a box and you shipped it across the country, and then someone opened up the box and was like, "Oh, look, it's Sarah." Right? There's nothing about the little bleh, right that goes, "That's Sarah," right? Like someone decided it was Sarah, right? And your idea of Sarah in your mind stays Sarah as Sarah grows from being a little like needy blob of flesh that just cries and poops to a fully functional adult, right? Who then has their own children, right? Right. And then does it again, like cycle, right? But there's nothing. And then you think Sarah is Sarah, right? Sarah becomes Sarah entire life, right? But you put Sarah in a box and ship her to China and they open Sarah up. They're not like, oh my God, it's Sarah, right? They're like, oh, who is that? Right. Now there's other kuntaks going off when those Chinese people open the box that was formerly known as Sarah. Okay. Right. A kuntak goes off. Oh, that's a human. Right. That's an adult. Why is there an adult in a DHL box? Right. We need to investigate this. But there's nothing about Sarah that makes Sarah Sarah. Right. Sarah equally could be Oksana or Natalia or Kimberly. Right. It's just a name. Right. It's made up. It's a construct. It's not real. It doesn't have any definitive nature. Like, yeah, I don't have a pen. Like a car key, right? That's not a good example. You guys get it. The pen is a pen, right? It does the pen announce itself as a pen? No, of course not. Right. So, and then we have so those are made up constructs. That helps, right? That helps us understand, right? Is it empty? Is it the highest emptiness? No, but it's effing helpful. You're kun talking all day long. You look at things and you go, that's that, that's that, that's this. You're identifying. And then those things are so powerful as identifications that they become that thing for you. Like a car key, a pen, Sarah, right? Your emotions, your thoughts. You're kun talking your thoughts. You're kun talking all day long with things that don't have any definitive nature. But those thoughts seem really real. Oh, yeah, I know they are. Yeah. The feeling is real too, right? The feeling has to be the feeling, right? You see. Now you can like now you can look at your childhood trauma. You could look at the things that happen, in patterns through your entire life. And you can be like, well, what part of this is kun talking? Probably all of it. That doesn't make it any less real as an experience. That's the thing. It is real because it's a kuntak. But the fact that you know that it's a kuntak, that means that you can that the reality that it has isn't fixed. It easily could be a different kuntak. Okay, if you had different seats, right? And then we have the second thing of things don't have any nature of growing, right? Shengwangs, things that depend on causes and conditions, right? And this is a little bit tricky. But in the mind only school, Shengwangs do have a definitive nature of being subject to the causes and conditions. So the thing that you put the pen onto, the thing that you put the kuntak onto, well, that has a definitive nature. Okay. And you really, you have to think about it. You have to spend some time thinking about it. Like, how is the stick not a kuntak? Right? How is the black cylinder a shengwang and not a kuntak? Right? And it actually feels a lot better, right? To be like, oh, okay, whew, I got it. Okay. So the pen is a pen not from its own side. A pen doesn't have any definitive nature because I put a kuntak onto it. It's called a pen. Penness comes from me. Got it. Okay. It's a construct. It's not real. The thing that I put it onto, well, that's subject to its causes and conditions. That stick is going to wear out eventually from its own side. I don't have to do anything. I can kuntak all day long. But that thing is subject to causes and conditions independent of me. Okay. And really, that feels so much more relaxing, right? To me, it does, right? And it's a stepping stone, of course, but it's really it's important. So then the third thing is totality, Yongdrups, right? Which is it's something that lacks the nature of being ultimate. Right. And it's a lack of self-existence that applies to all shengwangs, that applies to all dependent things. Right. Because that stick could be a chew toy. You see. There's a lack of self-existence to all shengwangs, to all dependent things. So to get to emptiness in the mind-only school is you take your shengwangs, you take away all of the kuntaks that you put onto it, and that's emptiness. Cancel the kuntak. Cancel pen. Cancel tashi. Cancel Sarah. Not Sarah's mind and body, but just Sarah, the idea Sarah, the unchanging Sarah-ness that you put on that was Sarah when she was a little blobby, like needy baby, up into adult Sarah, right? Did Sarah's body and mind change? Of course it did. I mean, I'm sure if she showed us some pictures when she was a baby, right? And then she grew up and she was 6 years old, then 12, and then 15, and then 30, and all of those things. Like, yeah, there was change. Eventually then Sarah will become a grandma, and you know, those changes happen. But the idea Sarah stays the same. Sarah was Sarah from the beginning to the end. Unchanging Sarah. Take away that from the Shengwang, then you have emptiness in the mind-only school. Emptiness flavor 4, I think. 3 or 4. Okay. So we just reviewed the last class for the last hour, and it's really important to hold your mind on that. Okay. Because those 3 attributes are the key to understanding the mind-only school. And it's key to understanding emptiness. So don't think it's some useless lower view that's not going to help you, because you think that way. Okay. Sarah easily could have been a Janet, and then we just would have called Sarah Janet for her whole life. And our idea would be Jana-ness, not Sarah-ness, right? A dog looks at the stick that eventually wears out, subject to its causes and conditions, and goes, that's a chew toy. Sarah, because Sarah, now this is where it gets interesting. Because Sarah is Sarah, Sarah sees a pen. The Kuntak Sarah is also related to Kuntak pen. Kuntak Sam, the dog, my little French bulldog, which I don't have yet, but little Sam, the Kuntak Sam also is related to Kuntak Chutoy. There's a deep relationship between those two. So much so that Kuntak Sarah doesn't create Kuntak Chutoy. So in the mind only school, get this. So in the mind only school, the seed that creates Sarah is also the seed that creates Pen. Sarah just got it. The seed that creates Sam is the same seed that creates Chutoy. So in the mind only school, the seed things like the subject and the object, Timness and Pen, are coming from the same seed. So there's a lack of something coming from a separate substance. It's not like there's a Sarah seed and then a Pen seed. They're not two separate things. They're the same thing. The thing that created Sarah is the same thing that created Pen. The thing that created Sam is also was what created the chew toy. So what if, okay, boom, now we're just gonna drop the microphone for you. You change the concept of you change the objects in your world. You change you have a paradise, period. You change you are in a hell realm. You change you're a dog. You have emptiness. Your the kuntak, your self kuntaking is what's creating your world in the mind only school. And it's not that far from the upper middle way. It's enough to get you there. Your self kuntaking is what's creating the world that you see, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Okay. If you change you change the world. Have you ever had an experience? I like to call it a plot twist. Everything was one way, and then all of a sudden, maybe you had a amazing shiatsu session where you released some emotion stuck in your neck when you turned to the left about 12 degrees that caused you to that released a cry like a baby for 2 minutes without a story, and then your entire world shifts. All of a sudden the entire world is different, including every single sickness you thought you had. Plot twist, right? Some people call it wizardry, right? Change you, change the world, period. Okay. And that's the power of the mind only school, right? You and the things that you see are the same seed. You, the you that is creating you and seeing you as you. Okay, this is where it gets hard. Sorry, trans interpreters. The you that is creating you right now is also creating the world. The you that is flowing from seeds, like Sarah, 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 right? Is also being like all the objects that you see in the world and how you relate to them and what they are. For you, for Sarah, for Tim, or whomever you are. Okay. The flow of those seeds are so intricately related to each other. And then the problem is that you see them as separate seeds in the mind only school. The problem is you go, that's a pen and I'm Sarah. Right. I read some very awful news this morning and I wish I hadn't. Right. Like wars are expanding. People are being assassinated because people don't like each other. What? And I'm like, that's out there. I'm not that person. I'm not that person. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. Mind only school says, sorry, buddy. You is that. You, the Tim, who saw someone who I actually don't, I don't agree with their point of view at all. But that doesn't mean you go out and kill people, right? But someone was killed in the United States because of their point of view, brazenly during a talk yesterday. Just shot. The shooter was on top of a building. Like, what world is that where people think it's okay to kill someone because you disagree with them? Where is that okay? Mind only school says that is you, Tim. That's that's heavy, right? The seed that created Tim this morning is also the seed that created the shooter who killed someone yesterday. Right? That's that's intense, right? They're not separate things. Now I'm like, okay, how am I not listening to other people? How am I not, listening to their point of view? How am I rejecting them, even in small ways? Or, don't necessarily go to the place where you feel guilty that, you're a terrible person. It's called past lives and infinite seeds. Okay. You're not a bad person. You're not a bad person if you see all those things. You're not a bad person if you live in a place where those things are happening. But it's a flow of seeds, right? And for me, that's one of the reasons why I teach, right? Because look, if what do we got in 80 people? If 80 people could understand this, you know, and realize that those are not separate seeds, we might have a chance of changing how people behave towards each other, right? If you could just change that. Enough people believe it, then it just changes, right? Literally, you become a different person. Your world becomes a different world. So don't let the awful things happen in the world deter you, because it's equally possible that awesome, amazing things can happen as well. And they actually are happening. You're just not noticing. They are happening. You can wizard your way out of all of this very quickly, actually. You know, plot twisted. Look for the plot twists every single day where you thought it was one way, but it was actually another way. You know, and then how do you treat other people? A good bout of suffering will help you treat people so much better. Suffering is your messenger. I'm sorry. That's why the Deva realms are terrible, because they don't have enough suffering to care about others. Right? Have a bout of 6 months of deep suffering, a year, a couple years. Then you're just nicer to people. Because you know what they're going through. You do. You just know it's not. It's painful. It's painful to be stuck in your own self misery, and you don't know how to get out. Reach out to other people. Help them. A lot of pain can be solved by companionship. Just feeling love. I saw a video the other day of, it was like, let's normalize telling our friends that we love them. Like, and they did all this research on, like, what does it do, neurologically, and with dopamine and oxytocin, or whatever all the love hormones are, and bonding hormones. I don't know. But to have someone tell you you love them, or to hear those words from a friend, oh, wow, that feels good. And sometimes it feels a little awkward, I think, at first, if you're not used to it. Right. And then especially like guys are like, oh my God, they're gonna think I'm gay if I tell them I love them. Shut up. Normalize telling your friends you love them. And if they're uncomfortable and they think you're gay, you'd be like, all right, whatever. I still love you, man. Like, I just love you. I'm not interested in kissing you. Okay. Fine. But normalize it, right? What kind of seeds, if everything is you and others, like the seed of you arising as other is everything else in the world, it's just a flow. You and the object are intricately related by the same seed. Just telling everyone you love them, like, what kind of magic would you be creating? Right? I see you. I understand you. I feel your pain. I understand this. Like, what kind of world would that be? And I think that's the power of the mind only school. We don't need Majjhimika. Well, we do, but you don't need it. Jason Kaba says mind only is enough. It's enough to it's enough to push you into those higher views. It's enough for you to see emptiness directly, frankly. And then when you see emptiness directly, then you're Majjhimika Prasangika. So then you can be prideful about, I'm Majjhimika Prasangika. But, probably if you saw emptiness directly, you wouldn't have that pride anyhow. So it'd be okay. Don't worry. Okay. So the Buddha said, that's one thing. Okay. That's one of five. And he actually said four other radical things. So, first of all, if by chance you were talking to a Tibetan, right, who studied this, and they ask you, what are you studying? And you say, oh, I'm studying Changne Lekshe Ningpo, right? I'm studying the art of interpretation, right? And then they'll say, well, what are you studying? Like, are you studying Noonimepa, which is the lack of self essence, right? Things have no definitive nature. I'm loosely translating. Or are you studying the other four? Okay, so it gets grouped into the one, which we just did, or the other four. Okay. So if you want to sound smart to a Tibetan, they're like, oh, Trangne Lekshe Ningpo. Okay, well, what are you studying? You're like, oh, the other four, right? The four, right? She. They'll be like, oh, you're so smart, right? If you want to feel a little prideful. But what we're going to do is we're going to study the other four, which are important, but you have to be able to understand the other four. You have to understand the first one. And that's why we spent, I don't know, almost the entire class on the first one again. It's okay. Well, don't worry. Because you need to understand the three attributes of the first to be able to understand the other four. So let me review again. Oh, hi. So the Buddha has taught that everything has a definitive nature. Comes out of his enlightenment under the Bodhi tree in his first hour of teaching. That's what he says, right? And then at some point he's like, "Look, Vulture's Peak, Peacock Peak, Rimrock, Arizona," and he says, "Look, just kidding. Nothing has any nature of its own. Nothing. No eyes, no ears, no mouth, no nose, no tongue, no skin. Nothing, 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 nothing." Right? Just kidding. And then the Bodhisattva is like, all right, Buddha, at Peacock's Peak, you were on some acid trip. I have no idea what you were talking about. Like, you said this and then you said this. What, can you help, please, respectfully? And the Buddha's like, yeah. Okay, got it. I was just being figurative when I was up there on Peacock's Peak. Just kidding. What I really meant was these three things: Kuntak's, Shengwang's, Yongdrup's. Okay. And I love watching all of you because, like, I can see that you're all like, you got the story down. Just keep telling yourself the story, right? They're all stories anyway. It's all a story anyway. Okay. But the Buddha, and but the Bodhisattva was also like, but dude, you also said these other things. You also said nothing grows, nothing stops, everything is always at peace, everything's not beyond a state of grief. You also said that too, and that don't make no sense either. Like, how could nothing grow at all? Bless you. How could nothing stop? How could everything be peace? And there's nothing peaceful about anything. How could everything be beyond grief? Plenty of grief in the world. What the F are you talking about? Right? What are you talking about, Buddha? Make no sense. Please help me because I respect you and because I feel like you're telling us something cool, but I don't understand. What are you talking about? Okay, so we just did the first one ad nauseum, but it's not ad nauseum. You need to think about it over and over and over again. How are you kuntaking? I'm kuntakable. I like this. The reason I'm thinking about this, like, there's a special word in English for all of you non-native speakers, but all of you native speakers know this. It starts with F and ends with a UCK. And it's a versatile word. It can be a noun, it can be a verb, it can be an adjective, it can be a gerund, it can be nice, it can be mean, it can be horrible, it can be funny, right? It can be enjoyable, it can be lots of things. Okay. It's a versatile word. It's an ugly word, mostly, right? But I'm just putting this kuntak as a replacement for that word. Like, I'm kuntakable. That's a great t-shirt, Anastasia. Right? That merch will sell. That'll fly off the shelf. Or you could say you're kuntakable. Put a little like winky face. How about that? right? But those of us who understand what it means, right? You're coming from my seeds anyway. Me and you are the same seed as a flow. We're not coming from separate seeds. And that's why you're kuntakable. Get it? Anyway, all right, I'm done. But I'm not. So, but think of like you need to think about all of you, like hold on to that. Like we're gonna go deeper into this in the next classes about how do seeds ripen in the mind only school? Where do they live? How do you look at those seeds? How are you looking at the world? Like how are all of those things related? And there's a whole system around it. But it's enough to understand that you and your world are coming from the same seed. And the way that you see that is you're kuntaking the stuff that you see. That pen is a kuntak. It's a construct. It's not there from its own side. You put it there. And you can see how close it is to middle way. So close, right? Just get obsessed one day and be like, where are my kuntaks? Right. And then you can just be like, well, let me pull that kuntak off that shengwang and I'll get to emptiness. Dissolve all appearances into themselves. That's the Vajragini sadhana. So, and then maybe you can see emptiness. Okay. So there's 4 other things. And we're going to just go through them slowly. I don't care if this takes us too long. Okay. So the first one is make. Ch tamje make. All existing things. Ch, existing thing. Tamje, all. Make. Don't grow. To chamde. All right. Makepa. Things do not grow. Right. Buddha said this. Buddha said makepa. Right. So things don't grow, right? I guess that's not the case, right? Nothing grows, right, Buddha? Of course, nothing grows. And he's sitting up there on Peacock's Peak announcing to Rimrock, Arizona, the center of the universe. By the way, that's the new tagline for Rimrock, the center of the universe. Someone made little stickers, right? So he was like, Chutamje and Makepa. Nothing grows, right? I guess that's not true. I guess, right? Like, look, nothing grows, right? Of course, right? And the Bodhisattva is like, Buddha, duh, shit's growing. Look at the sunflower. It's growing, right? Of course, back in the day, they didn't have photography and they didn't have Adobe Premiere and they didn't have all this stuff that you can then, capture the growth of a sunflower, right? But it doesn't take it doesn't take, you don't need that to understand that things don't grow. You put the seed in the ground and 60 days later, you got a sunflower, right? Things don't grow, right, Buddha? And the Buddha's like, well, no, that's not what I meant. And what I meant was that constructs don't grow, right? So in that way, especially the mind only school, That's growing is something that exists by definition. Okay. Constructs don't grow. The sunflower is not more or less sunflower. Sarah is never less Sarah. She's not ever more Sarah. She's just Sarah, right? Sarah doesn't start. Sarah just was always Sarah. Okay. Constructs, right? Constructs don't grow. And that's what I really meant when I said nothing starts, nothing grows. Chutamje makepa. Nothing starts, nothing grows. Right? Of course, some things grow. Shengwangs grow. Duh. But emptiness doesn't grow. Nothing is more empty or less empty. It's just emptiness, right? A Shengwang minus a Kuntak is emptiness. It's unchanging. Takpa, right? It doesn't mean that it's permanent. It just means that it's the same. Emptiness is the same throughout the existence of Sarah. Sarah was a little baby, then Sarah was a little child, then Sarah was a teenager, then Sarah was an adult, then Sarah will be a grandma, right? Those are Shengwangs. Don't worry about Shengwangs. But the Kuntak, that doesn't grow. She's always Sarah. She's not more or less Sarah. She's not half Sarah, half Emily. Okay. Right? That doesn't make any sense. She's always Sarah. Right? The pen is always a pen. It's never partially a pen. So the Sarah-ness doesn't grow. Like the Shenwang grows, or like the body grows, or something like that. All right. So what I really meant was that with reference to kuntaks, no, nothing grows. With reference to emptiness, nothing grows. Makepa. That's what I really meant. But I mean, look, we all just watched the flower grow, right? We watched it change, right? To us, the kuntak is sunflower. Maybe to an aphid, a little tiny bug, right? It's home. It's food, right? It's a large, big green, monstrosity, right? To us, it's just a little thing in a pot, right? Different kuntaks. But there's still something there that grew, right? We watched it grow, duh. Of course it grew. Okay. All right, that's the first one. The second one is magakpa, right? Nothing that exists ever stops. Okay. Nothing that exists ever stops. Like, this is my nerdery. Oh, wait, I gotta share this with sound. You gotta hear this one with sound. This is Tim having fun when preparing classes. Audio sharing works best when voice isolation is turned off. Oh, shut up. Okay, hold on.
What is thy bidding, my master?
There is a great disturbance in the force. It is battery.
If you only knew the power on the dark side.
Still going. Nothing outlasts the Energizer battery. It keeps going and going.
Okay. The point of that is the Energizer bunny a commercial from the 1980s, right? Is that their batteries just keep going. I know. Is Kyber Crystal died? Come on. That make no sense, but that's fine. Right? We always knew they were battery operated. So, but the Energizer batteries, the slogan is they keep going, they keep going, they keep going and going and going and going and going. They never stop. Okay. Just so you don't forget, right? Some secret Buddha put that advertising together for us today. So we will never forget that the Buddha said, nothing ever stops. But again, in the mind only school, what did the Buddha really mean? What did the Buddha really mean? Did he mean that things don't stop? Of course they stop. Batteries run out of power. Lightsabers run out of kyber crystals, right? Your body dies. That sunflower will die. Of course it stops. Duh. Like the real world shows us that things stop. Things that depend on causes and conditions stop. Shengwangs. Right? Kuntaks don't have a nature of stopping. Neither does Yongdrup or totality. Okay. So it has to be something that exists by definition for it to stop. Okay. And so unchanging things can't stop because they don't exist by definition. Oh, but Tim, what happens? What happens when Sarah, and let's not use that example. What happens when the battery stops being a battery? Right? Or when somebody dies, right? Are you telling me that, my godfather died last week? His name's Tony, right? Does Tony as construct die? Stop? Because there's no more Tony. Right? Tony's body is now in an urn. And an urn is a place where you put ashes. Right? He was cremated. Okay. Are those ashes still Tony? Right? And that's gotta think about it. But the kuntak does not stop because it doesn't exist by definition. Maybe when the Shenwang goes away, when the Shenwang stops, the kuntak doesn't have a place to be. So the kuntak was imaginary anyway, so it's just not there. And you have to think about the difference of it's just not there anymore to stopping. There's a philosophical and there's a major difference between the two. When a pen goes out of existence, when a pen is destroyed, its emptiness goes out of existence, but the emptiness did not stop. The pen has emptiness. Yes. When the pen's not there, is there an emptiness to the pen? Well, no, because the pen's not there. Okay. When the pen got destroyed, did the emptiness of the pen get destroyed? No. When the pen stopped, did the emptiness stop? No. But the emptiness is no longer there. Correct. Well, what happened to the emptiness between the time the emptiness of the pen existed and the emptiness of the pen not existed? What happened between those two? It didn't stop. And we're going to stop the class right here. Think about it. You have to think about it. But each of these 5 things, we'll finish the next 2 in the next class. Each of these 5 things there's a particular way that it's asking us to think and to get our minds used to it. So review Kuntaks, Shengwangs, and Yongdrups, right? and review those 2 videos, right? I chose those videos because I think they help us understand in fun ways what's going on. Cool. All right. We'll see you on Monday morning or Monday evening. Thank you all very much for joining. And we'll be back in a half hour with some, we're just going deep into emptiness. It gets good today. Bless you. So we will see you in a half hour if you're sticking around, and say goodbye to each other. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Tim.
teaching.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
so
Bye.
much.
See you soon.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Gracias.
Спасибо.
Thank you, team. Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
谢谢老师，谢谢翻译老师。
I love you all. Tschüss.
Tschüss.